Okay, we're here for the 6 of these videos, just talking through Humanity Ascendant. We're going to talk today about Operation 5 escalation. We're going to give you an overview of the scientist class, and then we'll have a bit of Q&A. We've only got one guest with us at the moment, which is Alex, so thanks for coming, Alex, but obviously this video will be available for everybody afterwards. Yeah, moving on then. So Op5 took place on 1st June 2019. It seems like an eternity away. New site. We've moved to a Giant Seat Scout camp in Manchester. There were a couple of reasons for this. The main one was that the combat area, or sort of like the mission area that we had at Barnsley, it were good, but it were very linear, very thin. It was sort of like an incline all up one side. It was just a long and thin site, so it didn't give us a lot of options for sort of combat and routes to take and things like that. So that was the main reason for the change to move to this new site. The new site has got a lot more sort of different terrain, a lot of like pits and hills, and open areas, closed areas, things like that. So it just offers us more flexibility and difference of areas. It's still not massive, but we think it's a step up. The facilities inside, I would say probably similar size to what we had at Barnsley. So no sort of problems there, similar sort of bunk space, things like that. So yeah, it's all in all, we think we've done two events there now, and it does seem to be the better site, but as always, we'll keep looking for improvements. So a bit about the event then. So the goals of the event, we had 3 sort of main goals for the event. Advance the Gideon bunker plot, which if you remember, so a lot of the long-term players remember this one really strongly. It's the terrorists that were sort of blew up a section of the bunker, forcing people onto the ground. It was sort of like getting to the grips with that, what was happening there, who were behind it all, or what was behind it. Continue with the ground slog with fortitude, just that really sort of grounded combat, slog for slog with an enemy sort of with similar capabilities. No real sort of special things floating about. Special rules are all just a good firefight and good strategy and tactics going on. And then laying the groundwork for a player council, which developed quite a bit more rapidly than what we thought it was going to. So, as I said, the story follows escalation on 3 fronts of plot lines, hence the title for the event. So we've got fortitude, we've got the Gideon, the terrorist threat headed up by Gideon, which eventually got outed as a rogue AI, and the recapture of the witch. And then overshadowing this was the revelation of a dictate called Dictate 21A. And what this revealed was that the council members were supposed to be subject to elections as soon as peaceful status were declared. There should have been elections, then there should be like elections every year or 2, and the council had chosen to suppress that dictate, which obviously wasn't a very good thing at all. And what actually happened is the players learned that a reporter, an NPC reporter, were going to break this story sort of live on the surface, and obviously would have caused a lot of problems, a lot of upheaval and things like that. And the players actually got in front of that, and they sort of held the reporter back and said, like, let's do this properly. Let's manage the process. Let's see what we can do. This as sort of like peacefully and straightforwardly as possible. Sort of worked, sort of didn't. Fair to say.
I will just on the subject of the dictate, whilst it's presented here in a lovely, perfect screenshot of an email, it was actually given to a player character having been gone through a paper shredder. So they spent the best part of 2 hours reassembling this dictate from thin. It was like watching a spy movie. They were slowly rebuilding this document from strips of paper. It was really cool.
I forgot about that bit. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, that ended up sort of being like I would say the sort of like a big thing that came out of the event in terms of progressing the game along, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So, main hooks was the recapture of which that had been heavily player-led. The science team had developed new side tracking technology, and they tested it in the field. They had to do that at the event, test the equipment, make sure it worked, do all calibration stuff while potentially being attacked, and then you use that to locate the witch. The revelation that Gideon was actually an AI, which led to some very interesting questions about its motives and how it had come about and things like that. And lots of sort of war-style decisions that with Fortitude that affected the relationship with the clans as well. So the players actually were making the choice of which areas to defend on the strategical map, which areas to sort of leave or look at as a secondary thing, looking at supply lines, you know, all that kind of thing. That's sort of like really getting into the nitty-gritty of the warfare aspect. So some greats then. The players taking control of the bunker reporter and using it to manoeuvre the existing corrupt council to reveal how desperate they were to cling on to power. That were a really sort of big thing. The players actually did like a recorded, well, a live broadcast basically, where they chose a number of people to represent the FEF. They basically delivered a message to all bunker inhabitants, sort of saying what had gone on and what they thought should happen and things like that. And what that actually meant is we had to change the event, because this war, dictate was supposed to be given to the players, and then they go away and think about it, and then maybe in downtime or next event they'd do something about it, but they didn't. They just jumped at it straight away. So a lot of things we had planned for Sunday actually got scrapped in the place of playing through this scenario where the players like didn't just set the ball rolling; they just pushed it off a cliff. And basically sort of initiated a full coup, basically. Not a coup, as Alex will say before he jumps in there. But it's a coup, but not a coup. But basically, which set a lot of things in motion, where we had the players on the surface sort of reacting to the council sending out enforcers and things and dealing with them, while at the same time certain members of the players were communicating with the bunker via radio with elements that were uprising and trying to manage that process to make sure people weren't getting hurt, and that all that sort of like people in the bunker, like a few hundred people sort of moving to usurp the council in the bunker while the players were dealing with these enforcement squads on the surface. And it just ended up being like a really sort of interesting live dynamic that I think the players got a lot out of. And then a really interesting one, a final battle with the enforcers. You know, you tend to have your sort of big missions or big battles on the Sunday, and one of those two that we had was actually ended up where the players talked down the combatants, and it would have been absolutely brutal. These enforcers are really not to be trifled with. You obviously got all the best bunker equipment, all the best armor, all sort of stuff, you know, really high-end sort of equivalent to player skills, and it would have been a real mess. So the fact that players were able to talk them down, and the bunker was sort of taken, the council were taken into custody relatively peacefully, was like a massive sort of, the players have done this, and I think they had massive agency over this event in terms of how they brought that about, and it was really definitely a proud moment for myself and the other GMs when they did that.
Relatively peacefully. Tell that to my nanite production facilities.
Yeah, there were some casualties within the bunker, things being set on fire and things in the normal not a coup situations, because it wasn't a coup, was it, gents? But yes.
We didn't immediately seize power, so no.
So not so great. I don't know if you chaps have got out to add, but I honestly don't recall anything here where anything went significantly wrong or any major issues as such. It was generally just a good event where there were a lot of things for the players to do, and then the players invented a lot more things to do on top of that, basically. And I think everybody had a lot of fun with it. And the elections afterwards were great fun, because the elections took place sort of straight after the event, over like a 2-3 week period, and there were like loads of videos being generated, loads of sort of conversations and debates going on the forums and things, and it all sort of influenced the voting. And the players, because they're the FEF, that they're the heroes on the surface that everybody looks up to, they could cast their vote like a single vote amongst 2,000 people, but they could also then spend their downtime action to influence the NPC's votes as well. So it was like a really sort of good process where players got really involved in it, and it led to a full player council.
I just want to touch on a couple of other good things that you've seen. So throughout this, you'll have seen there's a lot of pictures I've taken, and you will notice a distinct lift in both set dressing and props that were available throughout this event. Chris and Duff did an amazing job on all the barricades that you can see that were outside. That led to some a very different style of defense or offensive play for both the players and the monsters. We had barricades that weren't fixed in position, so we could move those around, and they started off in real random locations, and then we kind of put them together around trees and grouped them at different heights and stuff to allow different types of character to fight effectively. And then you can see the kind of quarantine box, which for those of you that are familiar with the movie The Rock, will have seen Nicolas Cage trying to disarm a baby bomb filled with nerve toxin. That was kind of like that, and that particular session there that you can see, that's both myself and Mehmet, who we'll hear from later. We were trying to, we were taking things out of test tubes and breaking stuff apart and then opening things. And I think Mehmet will testify that using big rubber gloves trying to do fine manipulations is a lot of fun, isn't it, man?
Yeah, you had to get people to feed you drinks.
That's true. You did have the king feeding you drinks whilst you were doing that, so yeah, it's appropriate, I guess.
Okay. So what did the players do? They did recapture the witch and developed a whole new wing of science in the process. So Psi is sort of like now like a fourth tier of science, an unofficial tier. They recovered Fortitude defectors as well, and learned a lot more about Bunker Fortitude and what's going on there. I think that's there's still a lot more to come with Bunker Fortitude. It's fair to say. There's a lot more to them than meets the eye. Yeah, the Forster Council elections, which we've talked about to death. But yeah, it's just really sort of good, strong event where we rolled with it. It's fair to say every event we've always had things that the players have asked to do, and we've nearly always been able to accommodate them. But this was sort of the one which were really sort of major, where we brought forward sort of a major thing from the next event into this one, because it's what the players wanted to do. And I think I would like to say that it was relatively seamless as well in us doing that. I don't know what Dave and Mem think on that one from a player's point of view.
So there was two, yeah, just on that. So I think the thing that enabled the GM team at the time to kind of be so flexible and reactive in that way was that the technology at this point was pretty much nailed down. The systems that we use for setting up the guns, all of that stuff, the in missions, changing of statistics, that part of the game by this point was very well established, and I think it took that distraction away from the GM team, allowing them to focus purely on what are the players doing, what crazy stuff have they asked us to do, how do we want to progress it. And I think that really demonstrated that level of kind of preparation that shows the constant evolution of the game.
Yeah, it was a proper step up from the previous event, where I think some people weren't able to do everything, all things. Only a certain amount could, but in this one, I think everybody got to do everything as well.
Yeah. Alex, so to add to that, mate?
Yeah, I think this event was the one that had the Chris and Duff mission that was the murder mystery.
Right, yeah.
And that was, I think, easily the best showcase you could possibly have for the QR technology and stuff. Yeah. There's things that I maybe would tweak having done it now, but it was still really good, and I'm a big advocate for it. And I wouldn't mind if you chose 6 other random players and ran exactly the same mission for them without updating your technology. I think that would be here's some new people, let's just whack them on the murder mystery mission.
Not a single round fired.
Yes, it was definitely an inspired mission, that one. I do apologise for not mentioning that one, chaps. It were on my list of things to do and it slipped off. But yeah, it was. You had the mock-up dummy in the tree, sort of. No, what, that 6th event, weren't it? Sorry, that weren't 5th.
This is where we buried the body out in the woods for them to find.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Body strung up in a tree was a different one.
That
That
was
was
the
the
event.
next mission. That was the Friday night of the mission of event 6.
Yeah.
The main advantage was it was multidisciplinary. So we had scientists saying what the blood was and who it matched to, but we had soldiers finding the blood, and then we had everybody was out on the QR code. It didn't matter what class you were, you had something to contribute.
So we had Ian, who plays a recon soldier, who's an ex-soldier in real life, and just loves to do nothing more than shoot guns generally, who never shot a gun on this mission at all and said it's one of the best missions he's ever played. So yeah, I think that's high praise indeed.
Oh, bless. You're making me blush, guys.
I'm mad because I didn't get to go on it. So that's why I...
Not bitter, but I am.
No, not at all. Not bitter at all, but I definitely am.
To be fair, I think I only went on it to make up the numbers at the end.
Wow.
It was really,
Dropped unlucky there then.
I did, yeah.
Okay then, so we're going to have a talk about the science class then, asking and answering all the right questions. That's generally what the scientists do. So I'm going to hand over to Dave and Mem, who's going to run you through that.
Yeah, so I don't play a scientist, but I play an engineer. Mehmet does play a scientist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the kind of the same stuff we talked about before. So from a rules point of view, how do the mechanics generally work, and talk about a few of the key skills and that kind of stuff. But I'm going to start with a statement saying that the scientists, there aren't any winners at Humanity Ascendant. You can't do anything on your own, but no one can do anything without scientists. The game space just requires them to play. They are the most involved character class in the game. If you want to be someone who gets involved in as much stuff as you can, if that's your thing, you want to go to an event and make sure you just interact with loads of people, get involved in loads of stuff, learn a load of stuff, scientist definitely the class for you. It is just like, you know, it is just so unique in comparison to the other classes in my mind. So yeah, they're involved in almost every part of the game. So whether you want to be the stay-at-home book nerd scientist, you want to be the out in the front line testing flora and fauna, or you want to be the experimenting with new types of technology and weaponry, then there's a role within the science community for you. Next slide, please. So again, just the kind of general run through of the skills to kind of point people generally in the right direction. Firearms training, again, for me, this is a gun game. If you want to be on a mission, the same rules for this as applies to medics and bureaucrats. Really, it's not compulsory for a scientist to carry a weapon, and in the past we've had scientists that don't. But you know, it is. You can stop someone from shooting at you if you shoot them first. So
it's a big chunk of the game as well, isn't it? To be fair.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. SciPad, don't leave home without it as a scientist. That's the only of all of the skills in every class. For me, the pad skill is the most necessary for scientists. There are so many things to interact with out in the field that you really need to have that to play the class properly, in my mind. You can get away with it, like you could probably manage it without on some of the other classes without it to start with, but absolutely as a scientist you need it. Then the next ones are kind of more tuning your character and progressing and talking about creating new projects or supporting existing projects with new information, that kind of stuff. So study allows you to utilize things that you specifically find in the field. So these are things that are tagged by the GM team with a QR code with the intention of providing an avenue or something new or a point of interest that will drive something within the game, which is not predetermined, but we have an idea about where it's going to go because it's generally steered.
Or you can contribute it to a project where it's like you can find a weapon part that might give you some research points towards a weapon project sort of thing. So it's it's two or three different ways we can use them.
Yep. So just on the subject of research points, they're a bit of a vague quantum resource that it's not tracked the same as the resources in other classes. An item will have different values dependent on what you're trying to use it in connection to. So we'll talk a bit about how we've talked a bit initially in the engineers section about how research projects work, but we'll cover it again later on. But yeah, it's just a way that you can speed up or enhance or make easier a project that's related to the thing that you've discovered. Free study. This is a bit more do what you like write your own adventure. You know, there are things out there in the world that we don't, you know, we'll put like some, you know, you might find a plant and it's just like, yeah, this plant's going to try and kill you. Well, you're like, oh, it's going to try and kill me. How is it going to try and kill me? Is it like slowing my blood down, or is it like, you know, giving me a heart attack? Right. Well, actually, I'm researching something that's related to. So you document it when you're out there, and you go to the GM team when you're researching your project and go, right, I found this thing, took a picture, here's some samples. Tell me how much it, like, you know, how relevant is that to the project I'm working on? So it's things that we won't have pre-prepared a value for. It's a little bit more free form. And I'd say, roughly speaking, of the scientists in the game that have played before, it's about 50-50, right, Mehmet, in your experience? Things like you will, like, of things you've found that have driven a project in a certain way, and other stuff you've just found and done random things with.
Yeah, pretty much. With the railgun technology, I think that was, we had the idea to do it anyway, and we were starting on it. But then when we came across High Vulcan, they were using rail technology anyway. So we just combined what they were doing into what we had planned to do as well. Yeah. And some of the other stuff, I'd say probably with the Witch plot, that was more player driven, wasn't it?
Yes.
Based on our encounter with her.
Yeah, the Witch had a whole bunch of things that were wrong with her in many ways. Like when you're trying to pick up like a 5'8", quite slim built girl, and the GMs are like, nah, she weighs about a ton, so get 4 of you on her because you can't pick her up. And you're like, what? that ain't right. And you know, and those kind of things that were, yeah, when Mehmet's character Ivan did a deeper dive with a doctor on the different things that were going on within the Witch's physiology, it opened up a whole raft of potential things we could do. And that takes us on to conceptualist. So you heard Mehmet there say that we'd already, as my character was a weapons engineer, and before Ivan started learning about how brains work, he was primarily a physicist, or a physicist and chemist. So we were utilizing, we'd already had an idea, we wanted advanced weaponry of some description, whether it was going to be plasma or railguns or whatever we decided we were going to end up doing. And conceptualist is exactly that. It's if you have an idea that's not related to anything that you've found, then that's where the conceptualist skill comes in. That allows you to just basically go, right, I'm going to invent an invisibility cloak. I mean, that isn't a thing.
Anything, yeah.
Yeah, warp, jump, teleporters. I mean, like literally anything, as crazy as you like. Now, a lot of these things we can't do in the game, but it's just, it means that you're able, your character has that flash of inspiration, that, you know, that the eureka moment of the apple hitting someone's head. That kind of, it represents that. Then these ones here, prodigal talent and genius, these ones allow you to further your character's specialization towards a particular area. So if you want to absolutely triple down on physics and become Albert Einstein, then you definitely can. There are ways to rather than having a broad approach on science, you can absolutely become the greatest physicist in existence or the greatest biologist in existence. And genius, again, just it's another way to funnel that specialization. So just a couple of sample builds. We've talked about these on all of the presentations so far. So for me, with scientists, this one you could go one of two ways. Field scientist, you can go SciPad and world weary. We've talked about how useful world weary is to engineers. The same applies to scientists. There will be things out there that you scan that will try and kill you for whatever reason. They could be poisonous plants, it could be irradiated equipment, it might be an explosive, there could be anything in the things that you find that once you've once you've interacted with them enough to scan them, that it will cause this effect to happen. And world weary will prevent, I would say, probably 70 to 75% of the things we've encountered that are dangerous that aren't people. it would well really stop them, like the vast majority of those. And then firearms trained or light armor would be the two options. They're both 5 points. Obviously, firearms training lets you shoot back. Light armor means you've got more time to run away. So it just depends on the type of on the type of scientist you intend to be. Although I think correct me if I'm not wrong, but Ivan started with SciPad, light armor, and firearms training, didn't you?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, because you wanted to shoot people, take a hit, and then just grab all the stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
But and that's why
game,
that's why you got stuff dropped on your head from a tree.
Yeah.
So this one is more if researching, working with other characters, learning about stuff is going to be your character's focus, you can quite easily do this particular build. So again, SciPad, study, and free study. So able to analyze things from QR codes, but also just utilize information you find and things that are out there in the world to drive research projects. I think this is not a terrible idea for someone who is intending to go on that route, especially as at the moment, from long-term players' point of view, the scientists are the most underrepresented class. So it's very possible for things to be missed on missions, because when there's only one or two scientists, they can't be everywhere all the time. So this one could be an exceptionally useful one. Not necessarily, you're not doing nothing in a firefight, you are hiding behind a tree. But when they find stuff, you will be incredibly useful. And the Weary Explorer, which is a slight variant on the kind of field scientists. So instead of taking the firearms or light armor, you take study instead. So again, you're a bit safer from the things in the world that might cause you problems, but you're restricted to the information that the GMs are providing you via your pad when you scan things.
So we're going to move on to talking about projects next, because it's scientists that use projects more than anybody else. I would say probably engineers coming in second. But Mem, do you just want to give some sort of feedback on how scientists actually played in the field for you and the type of things you've encountered, and that actually makes it more than the skills, if you know what I mean?
Well, I'm not really a typical scientist, am I? Like, because I walk about with a railgun. But with being in the field itself, I don't think there's much I can't do at the moment. Like I'm able to shoot a gun, take some hits, but also when we do come across anything that is for scientists to look at, I've been able to look at. So I'm pretty able to do quite a few things. The only thing I would struggle with is research, but that's because of the choice I've taken there. But pretty much with all of the things we've come across, I've been able to deal with it at the time as well. I think we've come across some plants. The only way I can deal with them is because I didn't take well Weary, and they decided to drop some poisonous thorns on my head. But pretty much everything else I've been able to either collect or ascertain what it was at the time. So like, for example, the C7 fissure that we found as well, which is what we needed for our research. So I was able to study that, acquire some samples. And I would say as well, if you are playing scientist, do take test tubes or containers, because there's things out there to pick up. And then if you can't deal with it at the time, you can deal with it later on, either inside the bunker or in downtime as well. So test tubes, gloves, little like tools as well to pick it up, so you're not exposing yourself to it.
So, sorry, go on, Dave.
So I was going to say, so like for me, they have a very similar kind of kit set to an engineer.
And a medic as well.
Yeah, and
a bit of both.
So you need, so gloves, which, after the last year and a half, I'd be very surprised if people don't have pairs of gloves somewhere around in their house. But yeah, those type of gloves are very handy. Something to collect samples in. For example, we're building a a mobile testing kit for Deb, who's about to start playing a scientist, and she's got little tiny Tupperware, sealable Tupperware boxes, and some metal containers, and a fairly chunky metal lined box to put radioactive stuff in. So you can go as big as you want with regard to being able to collect things, and it's a very, considering a lot of people view scientists as the kind of stay at home, do the research projects, I'd say outside of engineers, they're the ones who interact with props the most on a mission, for sure.
Yeah, to be fair, that's kind of what I was driving at. So if we think about some of the things that I think Mem's had his fingers in more or less every one of them. To be fair, that's like you've mixing the compounds for the cooling system. And then doing all the balancing while you're under fire in the field, and it's just various things like that. There's been, I would say, every event there's always been at least one, maybe two, three things where it's like you've got a lot of interaction with props and like on missions and that. It's not just about collect, sample, fill a form in. It's there's always a lot more to do than that.
I would say that is potentially one of the only downsides to the class. Is that there is so much for scientists to get involved in that it can sometimes look a little overwhelming. So as an example, at most events, like me and Mehmet will forego going out on an actual mission in the field, and we'll spend 2 hours in the outpost itself doing notes, making notes, dismantling things, using the decontamination box, examining stuff, doing whatever else we need to do, because there's always so much for those kind of classes to get involved in.
We're definitely not nursing hangovers.
Definitely not. No. And to be fair, we do normally sweep out the rooms as well at the same time. Being former criminals, we expect to have to keep the place clean at the same time. So.
Okay, so bit of a chat about projects in HASS then, because obviously scientists and I would say then engineers, then medics are sort of the people that use this system the most. So there's two types of projects really. Downtime is the one where you use the form all the time, and it's basically you use your downtime actions, which all players get two of. One of the things you can do with your downtime actions is to contribute research points to a project. And it might look complicated, but it's actually quite straightforward. We'll talk through that. We're also in uptime, whether you know it or not. Almost everything that a scientist does is a project in some way, shape, or form. Most of them won't require a form or anything like that. If it's something that's going over the entire event, the GMs might give the players a form and say, look, use this to keep track of what you've done and that, but rarely we do that. It's generally sort of things like interacting with the hot box, like what Mem was talking about earlier with the gloves that Dave run about, things like that. That's a project in itself, basically, because it's a problem, it's got a solution, and it's got an outcome or several outcomes. So, these are all sort of projects. So, but in terms of the sort of the paper projects and the downtime stuff, so each of these projects will need 2 or 3 things: resources, which can be money and or salvage, skill input in the form of discipline use, and specific items or conditions or specific bits of knowledge or something like that to sort of progress it. And these are written up initially. 9 times out of 10, these are written up by the players. So this is one that an engineer's done, but it still follows exactly the same process. This is Andy Brooks, one of our long-term engineering players. He's come up with this idea: the players encounter power armor in the field being wielded by Bunker Fortitude, and says, well, power armor's a really big job, but what can we do? Like, we've got a load of these parts and that off Bunker Fortitude. We've got an idea how some of this stuff works. How can we start to leverage some of that to our advantage? And he came up with this basically augmented armor. And the idea was that you'd link all the armor together and you give like flow through joints, so and nanite reserve, so nanites could move from panel to panel, sort of reinforcing and repairing the armor, so they got more benefit from the armor. So he wrote this up off his own back. I think we gave him a little bit of advice from the GMs, just sort of a couple of ideas on how to word it and things like that. But 90% of that was what he did. So he filled in that top bit, and then the GM spent a little bit of time and worked out what he needed to contribute to achieve it. So these are discipline points. So Armor tech is one of the specializations of engineering. Gadget tech is another. The way it works with disciplines is your disciplines that you can spend per action, downtime action, is equal to your rank. But if you're specialized in one of these items, you get double. So Andy, by using both his downtime actions, was able to do this himself because he was top ranked, so rank 5. So the first one, he got 10 points onto his armor tech. That's his first action. And the second point, he did the 5 points with the armor tech, gadget tech. So that's that completed. And then you've got the salvaging credits. So we asked him to contribute 5 pieces of engineering salvage, or 5 value of engineering salvage, 3 value of military, and 500 credits. And he did all that. And then basically this was the conditions for putting it through. What will it do, and how do they finish off the research? So basically it's going to give 10 more health than the normal version, which is quite powerful. It's better than the engineering ability, the light armor plate and heavy armor plate, and it's a step above that. But the condition is he has to use it as a prototype, an event. Once he uses that prototype, and it's not like it's going to fail or anything like that, it just needs to use it, people need to see it, things like that. We have a look at the FISREP and all that. Once we're happy with that, at the end of that event, he will then actually have the blueprint to be able to make that. And you could sell that blueprint to our engineers, or give it to the bunker so it can be sort of distributed to the engineers, so everybody can then build that afterwards. So that's quite a straightforward project. There have been ones that have been a lot more complicated, where a lot of these are filled in. You've had like 4 or 5 people contributing to it, but it's just a little bit of maths, and it's as complicated as the players want to make it, basically. But ultimately, it can all be broken down into bite-sized chunks, or you can tackle a sort of big project all at once. To add to projects, Dave, Mem, anyone?
Yeah, just a couple of examples really, just of the 2 different types. So we've seen one there of a downtime one. Another one was the construction of the C7 mobile C7 power generators, and the railguns. So that was quite a heavy downtime research. And then the other example was when we created the nanite signal jammer for to disrupt Hive Apollo. That entire project was carried out in uptime between the Saturday and the Sunday of an event. So we decided the way to try and stop a nanite virus, one of the AI controllers, from jumping out of one of its control nodes back to its master location, was we created a signal disruptor. We built the FISREP. It had LED lights on it, and it lit up and that kind of stuff. Although at one point you turned it off and the lights came on, and then you turned it on and the lights went off. The wiring was a bit suspect on some of those parts, but we ironed it out in the end, and we took that FISREP out into the field. And yeah, that was engineers and scientists all working together in the field at an event doing a project. It was, that's probably the best example I can think of an uptime real impact project.
Okay. Anyone else have anything to add? Out from you, else from yourself, Mem?
Yeah, with the research as well. It's not just something that helps you solve like a crisis or fixed technology as well. It's also gleaming into some of the meta plot of the game as well. I think with the scientists, you get a bit more of a look at the plot itself. And I think some of the things that we've encountered has given us a bit more understanding of things like a high Vulcan, but also with Scientists as well, because they're a major part of the game, and not much is known about it, but with some of the things that we've encountered and researched, we've got more of an idea on that. So if you are looking for like a class or to have a bit more understanding of a plot, I think Scientists are a good step in for that as well.
I'll certainly make sure you befriend one, and make sure he pours his heart out to you over a drink. Yeah. Okay. Alex, have you got any questions from you, mate? It's probably not your topic of expertise. Are you want to add, or?
I was going to say there should be some sort of Samantha Carter or Daniel Jackson reference made. I'm surprised that nobody's done that, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, firearms trains, light armor use, side pad. There you go, Stargate. Off you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. That was Ivan. Ivan was Samantha Carter on his first mission.
Point. I think one of the, bearing in mind that one of my very strong influences for developing game was XCOM and the way that XCOM deals with things, and I think it's quite evident in a lot of the structures and things like that. And if you think about the relationship between scientists and the other classes in XCOM, it's very similar here. And you know how sort of integral scientists are to your success in that game, and it's very similar here. There's no two ways about it.
I would say engineers and medics would only be playing half a class if scientists didn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there were no scientists in the game, then you're just missing out on a huge chunk of the well, for the most part anyway. I mean, it depends on the type of engineer or medic that you intend to be, but without them, it is a different game entirely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else for anything else? No.
I don't think so. Just, are we gonna? I know we haven't labelled it yet, but are we going to talk about Psion assists at any point as part of these, or are we not?
I think what I'm going to do is we'll have after we've done the bureaucrats in 2 weeks' time. Before, it might not be 2 weeks after that, but certainly before the next event, but probably about a month before, something like that. I'm going to try and do like a wrap-up thing where we say, this is where the plot is now, this is where we've got to, and this is what people know. And I'm going to try and pull some of the player reports in, maybe get some of the players to come and talk about their reports, and say, this is where the game is now. And obviously, what's happening with Scions and the Witch and everything like that, the players can come and volunteer that information in, so it can be a pseudo in-character briefing as well, maybe as well. So that's my idea. That's my idea. I think that'll work well because we've got a lot of new players coming in, and it's a way to sort of bring them up to date and hopefully point them towards the database as well to start looking at these reports. Because I was going through them myself the last couple of days, and it's amazing how much information is hidden in there, stuff that even I'd forgotten about. So yeah, really useful.
I'd recommend everyone reads mine.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for coming along, James, and thanks for coming along, Alex, and contributing a bit there. And we'll get this video posted up sharpish, and we'll catch up with everybody online and in the field.